Good evening to all, dear participants of the webinar and today's speaker, Dr. Hanumanandu sir, Dr. Jayachandran sir, Dr. Ravichandran sir, Dr. B.K. Jina sir, and dear friends. World Oceans Day remains every one of the major role the oceans have in everyday life. Oceans are considered to be the lungs of the planet, a critical part of the biosphere, and are a major source of food and medicine. The purpose of the Ocean Day is to inform and educate the public about the impact of human actions on the oceans, develop a worldwide movement of citizens, and mobilize and unite the world's population on a project for the sustainable management of the world's ocean. On the occasion of World's Oceans Day on June 8, the United Nations has called for sustainable efforts and stopping plastic pollution in order to the save ocean. The theme of this year's World's Ocean Day is the ocean, life and livelihoods. It is especially relevant in the lead up to the undecadable of ocean science, undecade of ocean science for sustainable development, which will run from 2020 to 2030. The decade is aimed at strengthening international cooperation to develop scientific research and innovative technologies that are capable of connecting ocean science with the needs of modern society according to the United Nations. I conclude by extending a warm welcome to the chief guest, Dr. M.A. Hanumanandu, to this webinar, Agora 2021, jointly organized by Ocean Society of India, Cochin chapter and SN College, Kollam. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sunil sir. Over to Dr. M. Ravichandran sir for the special introductory remarks.
Very good evening to all of you. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all for this webinar. Thanks to SN College Kollam, Kochi and Ocean Society of India Kochi chapter for organizing this event. Greetings to all on the occasion of World Ocean Day. As Principal mentioned, this year's theme of this ocean is the ocean, life and livelihoods, underscores the importance of the oceans for the benefit of the society. Ocean Society of India was formed in the year 2006 in Kochi for sharing knowledge, experience of individuals, as well as a scientific institution and industrial organization in the realm of ocean science, technology, engineering, and allied fields. It has 3 local chapters, Kochi, Chennai, Pune, and now more than 500 members in this Ocean Society of India. Under this OSI, there are quarterly bulletin. Ocean Digest has been released, published in every quarter, and it is having very preliminary scientific activities of what is done by India. It is being exposed. And also as part of Ocean Society of India, we conduct a biennial conference. Once in 2 years, there is a OCCON conference also will be held in once in 2 years. And this year conference will be held in NCPR in our institutions in August 2021. And this ocean scientists and engineers who have made outstanding contribution in the field of ocean science and technology, we are also awarding them, and also many youngsters, especially PG Dissertation Award to young students also organized by the Ocean Society of India. Coming back to the ocean science, the importance of the ocean science and technology, Government of India has started many institutions apart from many universities, you can do the ocean science and technology research. But IITs, IISER, IIC, all are doing ocean science. Apart from that, there are many institutions in the MOES, especially in the MOES institutions, National Institute of Ocean Technology, Chennai for ocean technology, Indian National Center for Ocean Information Services for the ocean-related services, and IITM Pune for climate research, ocean-related climate research, and National Center for Coastal Research is for coastal related problems, and NCES, Thiruvananthapuram, it is all geological and coastal processes to understand, and CMLRE for living resources, and NCPR Goa for non-living resources. Apart from Ministry of Earth Sciences, there are many other ministry, especially CSIR organization like National Institute of Oceanography, NGRI, Hyderabad, and also ISRO organization, Space Application Center, and NRSC, National Remote Sensing Center, Fisheries Institute, CMFRI, CIFT, and also Ministry of Environment and Forest, mainly National Center for Sustainable Coastal Zone Management Center in Chennai, and there are Aquaculture Institute and Brackish Water Institute. There are many institutes in India, it is there. So essentially what they are trying to do is to understand the ocean, try to predict the better ocean, and try to harness basically a sustainable ocean. Basically, we have to harness both living and non-living resources. At the same time, we have to preserve our ocean without polluting or without damaging the oceans. So that is the purpose of our ocean institutions, and universities are working together. And I am making it this institute name mainly. Many of the students may not be knowing what are the institutions are available. So I think most of you may be doing research and other activities, and you can also join as a scientist and do research. The ocean area requires all discipline. Take it up physics, mathematics, biology, chemistry, engineering, medical, all the fields are required ocean-related research. So I request all the students to try to come to ocean-related area to enrich the ocean knowledge as well as for the sustainable ocean development. On behalf of OSI, I once again thank the organizing committee for arranging this webinar, and a special thanks to local chapter Kochi and also Dr. Atmanand for delivering today's talk on technology. Thank you one and all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ravichandran sir. Dear participants, now we are presenting an interesting video released by ECOP, Early Career Ocean Professionals, as part of United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development.
Across the subcontinent, young professionals are working on myriads of proposals in the field of ocean and atmosphere. We ECOPs have one aim: supporting ocean-based livelihoods through our research and contributing towards a sustainable blue economy.
Hi, I'm Sunanda. I'm an early career ocean professional from India. On this World Ocean Day, I would like to introduce some of the ECOPs from various institutions in India.
My name is Krishnita Bhattacharya and I am an ocean modeler. I study the response of biogeochemistry of the Indian Ocean to tropical cyclones. My work aims to achieve a more predicted ocean so as to be able to protect the coasts from repeated destruction.
Hello, I'm Shamrita Khatak. I broadly work on intraseasonal oscillations over Indian Ocean. So these are systems born over Indian Ocean, interacts with the ocean, and most of them ultimately move towards the coast. Also, for its connection to tropical cyclones, there is a potential of better prediction of tropical cyclones and prediction with much longer lead time using the understanding.
Hi, I am Ardra, postgraduate in oceanography from the Department of Physical Oceanography. Hydroxyl radical is one of the major oxidant in the lower troposphere, and it is known as the cleansing agent of atmosphere. In this study, we have analyzed the distribution of OH radicals over Indian Ocean, and we have found a seasonal OH minimum over Indian Ocean.
Hi, I'm Gopi Krishnan. My broad area of research includes the impact of atmospheric pollution over the Indian Ocean. Our findings reveal an alarming increase in the amount of formaldehyde over the Indian Ocean, and this was among the top 5 most polluted shipping tracks of the globe. In order to reduce this, we recommend the better quality fuels and strict regulations for shipping emissions, since 80% of the international trade is through the sea, and this is expected to increase by 2 times in 2030 and by 4 times by 2050.
I am Adira Krishnan, a research scholar from Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. My broad area of research is climate change impact on wind waves, and I will contribute my research towards a predictive ocean.
Hello everyone, my name is Femi Thomas. I am an Arctic researcher, which is as interesting as it sounds. Over the decades, it's been known that Arctic is warming at alarming rate. This has got global significance because of its impacts such as sea ice decline, glacier melting, permafrost thawing, etc. I am an ecologist looking at the bacterial diversity and its interaction with environmental contaminants like metals in different ecosystems like glaciers and fjords in Arctic, trying to understand ecosystem responses towards climate change using microorganisms.
My name is Gayatri Iliam. My work focuses on Antarctica's interactions on the global climate during the past and present times using Antarctic ice core records and surface temperature measurements. This work will contribute towards a better understanding of Antarctica's impact on the sea level rise, which is a dreadful consequence of global warming.
Hi, I am Ashwati Das. My area of research is on coastal and open ocean interaction in Antarctica.
Hi, I'm Atulya. My broad area of research includes Arctic precipitation and how different ocean atmospheric parameters influence them. The research definitely addresses climate change as well as extreme precipitation events.
I am Rohit Balakrishnan. I work on sea level variability, particularly mass redistribution in the ocean. We discovered a basin-wide sea level variability in the tropical Indian Ocean posed by Madam Julie Station. This work got published in Nature Communications, which earned me with 2 prestigious awards. Young Scientist Award 2020 from World Meteorological Organization and Eugene Laford Medal 2019 from IAP. Currently, we are exploring the implications of oceanic mass redistribution on the rate of Earth's rotation.
My name is Vikrant. I'm a postgraduate at Andhra University. I built ocean robots and observatory systems for ocean monitoring and research. It helps to monitor the ocean environment and ecosystem continuously in real time. These ocean robots travels the longer distance into the ocean and collect the real-time in situ data for better forecast and to understand the ocean process. In this way, ocean robots and observatory systems helps to monitor our oceans.
My name is Apurva P. Joshi. My broad area of research is modeling of ocean acidification scenarios. My research would be contributing to predictive oceans.
Mithila Varnavi, and I am dealing with one such variability in ocean known as mesoscale variability. Broadly speaking, my basic topic includes studying the dynamic nature of ocean using different models.
Hi everyone, I'm Tisha Matthew. I work on marine biogeochemistry, particularly the biogeochemical variability of Indian Ocean using observations and numerical models.
My name is Ronnie Peter. My broad area of research is Indian Ocean carbon cycle and global warming. I work towards a productive ocean.
My name is Vivek Selenki. My broad research area is ocean biochemistry and ecosystem modeling.
Myself, Madhusudan Pal. My research is based on the biogeochemical processes operating in the Eastern Indian Ocean and their linkage towards global climate change.
My name is B. Aditya from IIT Delhi. I'm doing my PhD on the variability of internal waves in the Andaman Sea. Internal waves play an important role in determining the global ocean climate. So, understanding their variability helps in the sustainable development of our oceans.
Myself, Anu. My research mainly focuses on studying the biophysical interactions of the North Indian Ocean, and this research fits in the productive and predictive ocean.
My name is Damin. My area of research is marine benthic ecology, metal speciation, and metal accumulation in benthic organisms.
My name is Lamzahal Sito. I'm a PhD student in metal biogeochemistry. The kind of research I do fits in healthy and resilient ocean.
My name is Kilambale Raj. I am from Visakhapatnam Port City in East Coast of India. I am a junior research fellow in modeling of ocean waves.
Hi, I'm Sharanya Jayendran. My broad area of research is metal biogeochemistry, mostly around India.
I am Tom Elias. My broad research topic is physical model studies on geotextile breakwaters, and I work for a safe and sustainable coastal environment.
This is Shivaya Bodra, and my research mainly focuses on coastal hazardous currents such as rip currents, which cause many drowning cases in many beaches of the world.
My name is Neeraj Prakash. My research is mainly consists of shoreline management, EAA, and EEZ bathymetry. Our aim is to provide a sustainable engineering solution to the coastline all over India.
Hi, my name is Ajish Amas. Basically, I am a marine geologist. Right now, I am working with the coastal related issues.
My name is Aisha Janet. I am working on modeling migration in coastal areas due to extreme events. So I'll be contributing towards understanding the impact of climate change and environmental stress on population who are dependent on ocean.
And my name is Sri Lakshmi. I'm researching on the climatology and the characteristic aspects of the swell peaks in the Indian Ocean.
I am Vandana Gupta. I am working on coastal waters. My study interest is source and fate of pharmaceuticals and personal care products.
This is Avanti Acharya. I work on the biogeochemistry of greenhouse gases, not in the ocean, but the Indian Sundarbans estuaries, which are just as engaging and inspiring. Looking forward to exchanging ideas with all you early career professionals on the ocean out there.
It's an inspiring video, sir.
Are we going to show the competition?
Yeah,
If
sure,
so,
sir.
just one minute, you just show it and then we will proceed.
Okay, sir. Right now we are announcing the results of the competition held at INCOIS, Hyderabad as part of United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. Sunil sir? Sir is not here, sir. Jayachandran sir? Our principal is, right now he is not here.
Just if the
Janay
can
sir?
show that.
Yeah, Janay sir? Janay sir, could you share the file? These are the art contest entries.
This is the art contest entry made for researchers as well as the small kids. And this is the category. There is a lot of people have participated. I'm going slow by slow to show these things. And from elderly category, those are research scholar et al. They also participated. And among that, winners for the child category, we have selected 3 prizes. That this is the first prizes. Gone to 14 years old, that Krishan S, 14 years old, Chennai, from Chennai. He has drawn this. And this is the second prize. This is Bidut Krishnan, 13 years old, from Chennai again. Then this is the third prize. This is the third standard students has drawn this. And coming to this elderly category for this research scholars and all, this is the first prize from Rahul PR. Is a master students, MIT Institute of Design, Pune. He has done this. And the second prize is Tom Elias, the PhD scholar, NIT Karnataka. Then that third prize is Emria Babu, MTech, few posts. So these are the prizes are declared. A lot of people have participated. So we congratulations, give a big hand to them by congratulating them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
We shall proceed to our presentation by Dr. Atmanand.
Okay, let me introduce.
You can invite.
Okay, let me introduce today's speaker, Dr. M.A. Atmanand. Dr. Atmanand is a member of Executive Planning Group for the preparation of UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainability of Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, IOC of UNESCO. He is the past chair of IOC Regional Committee for the Central Indian Ocean, IOC Indio. He retired as Director of National Institute of Ocean Technology, India, where he spearheaded many projects in the area of ocean technology, like low temperature thermal desalination, setting up of data buoys and tsunami buoys, coastal protection, deep sea mining, to name a few. Dr. Atmanand has 34 years of experience in the field of ocean technology. He is an elected member of Society for Underwater Technology Council. An instrumentation and control engineer by profession, he took his undergraduate degree from University of Calicut, master's and doctorate degrees from Indian Institute of Technology, Madras. He has done pioneering work on the area of deep sea technologies in India. He led a team of engineers for the design and development of underwater crawler for deep sea operation. Dr. Atmanand has taken this challenge further to design and implement a work-class remotely operable vehicle that can be used for assisting the mining operations, and was tested successfully at the Priyadarshini Lake at Antarctica. It was under his supervision that India's first polar underwater mooring observatory and polar remotely operable vehicle was developed and tested. The mooring was established at Arctic region. He has also guided various indigenization programs for ocean observation and underwater systems. Dr. Atmanand has published more than 146 papers, including international journals, international conferences, book chapter, national conferences, and others. He has delivered more than 300 invited lectures in conferences. He has widely traveled in capacities like technology transfer as part of delegations, etc., to countries like France, Russia, USA, UK, Germany, Portugal, Korea, Japan, Mauritius, Malaysia, Indonesia, etc. After retirement, he is sharing his experience of more than 2 decades with students at Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, as a visiting professor. Sir, you have a very fabulous biodata and a fabulous career. I have scissored 90% of it. Pardon me, sir. We welcome you, dear sir, to the 42nd talk of our webinar series organized by Srinarayana College, Kollam. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tisha. That was a very detailed introduction, which was not required that much. But anyway, thank you so much. Let me first of all thank Dr. Ravichandran, Dr. Jayachandran, both the Dr. Ravichandrans, I mean, M and C, so to say, Dr. Jena, and all other organizers for inviting me for this special series of talks, especially Srinarayana College at Kollam. Before I just start the presentation, I just wanted to tell you about the ECOPS, the Early Career Ocean Professionals. As I see that there are 245 participants, and I hope that at least 200 of them are students. And the video which you saw is the tip of the iceberg about the ocean research activities being done in the country. You have a lot of potential, and the UN Decade has made this early career ocean professionals to come together. That would make you as a forum for exchange of ideas, research publications, and all the students who are here would really benefit by having this interaction. So this particular video was prepared by Sunanda and team. There were about, I think, 30 students who participated as part of this World Oceans Day. And I would just acknowledge the work done by them in this forum. I will just request all of you to just come on in the video so that all the participants can really see you. Can you, if you don't mind, switch on the video, Sunanda and team, whoever is available, whoever has been given the rights to open the video, please do that and put it in the gallery view so that all can be seen. So my compliments to all of you, and let me just ask, I think still many are not on video, looks like. Just if Dr. Jisha could really bring some more.
Some names I couldn't found, sir. But
Okay.
some name, there are so many Ashwatis and so many Sri Lakshmi, so I couldn't find.
Okay, I think that's fine. It's
Better
all
to
right.
raise their hand option they can use.
It's all right. I think that's fine. I think some
I think,
a few
sir,
participants.
your students can raise hand option.
Yes, actually, they are not really my students. I mean, they are really students in India. I mean, I was just instrumental in supporting them. I think some 7 participants have raised their hands. If it is possible, 8 of them, if it is possible to just put their video on, that will give a good feel for them, that not only to them, but all the other 200 students who are here, who can interact with them. I would request them to interact and take their research forward. You would have seen some of them are working in Arctic region. You really will not get any opportunity to how the Arctic feels or Antarctica feels. They may be able to take you after the COVID to NCPR, where there are labs where they maintain ice cores at I think -40 degrees or whatever it is, and you will be able to do a lot of work there. So my point is that you should use this opportunity to interact with others and move on. I think you can all show your hand so that everybody is visible. You can just wave to them so that the students are, yes, I think I can see the students waving. Okay, fine. So I think that is good. Thank you very much for this effort. Let me now start my presentation. I would like to share the screen. Perhaps by the time my talk is over, if everybody is coming, you can once again take a picture if you wish. So I will start sharing the screen. You just check whether it is visible in a full screen mode. Can you see on full screen now?
Yeah, perfect, sir.
Okay, good. Thank you very much once again. So I would, first of all, I will say that the projects or the today's talk will be mainly based on the work which I did at National Institute of Ocean Technology, where I was the director till September last year. And I would like to acknowledge all my former colleagues who have really put a lot of efforts in taking up these activities. So first of all, I would like to say that and then proceed further. So I would touch upon the importance of the oceans and technology development something about renewable energy, desalination, and deep sea technologies, ocean observations, and coastal protection, and a little bit on marine prospecting and the UN Decade of Ocean Science before concluding. So the 5 challenges which are being faced, just 1 second, I have to just move this, otherwise I'm not able to see it here. 1 second, please. The challenges of the 21st century are very well known, that is population and energy demand, food supply, clean environment, water supply. Of course, among this, some of the things like population increase, we cannot, our ocean community may not be able to directly intervene, but all the other aspects, we have a role. We cannot say that we are not part of it. So we should be able to somehow attack these problems. Now, sorry. So we all know that the world's oxygen, 50% is from the ocean, and the carbon dioxide, it is completely absorbed by the oceans. And the heat transport from the equator to poles, weather, climate, all these things are being regulated by the oceans. And the global trade is by ship, that is the cheapest mode of transportation. And the businesses employ more than 3 million people. And if you see, as far as the blue economy is concerned, if you consider the GDP, considering oceans as a country, you can say that it's about US dollar 2.5 trillions by goods and services, which is basically through seafood, fisheries, energy, hydrocarbon, pharmaceutical, and whatnot. So this is the one point which we have to keep in mind. Now, what are the technological interventions which we have to see, both in living and non-living? But my talk would be mostly on non-living. So what are the assets which we have to protect? The oceans definitely has to be protected. And as a corollary, the beaches are to be protected, the fish stock, coral reefs, etc. And we know the issues of cyclones which have increased, and tsunamis, and the polar oceans are to be monitored. These are all quite important interventions we should take up. Just for the sake of completeness, I will tell, because I see that majority are students, so I would like to give some fundamentals of what is a territorial sea, which is up to 12 nautical miles, and EEZ is up to 200 nautical miles, and continental shelf is up to 350 nautical miles, and after which you have the high seas. And the total exclusive economic zone is about 137 million square kilometers, because we have got the islands of Lakshadweep and Andamans, because of which we have got really a large area. And we have to understand the resource potentials in this region. Non-renewable energy, which we should not talk much, because that really gives all the issues of carbon footprint and whatnot, global warming, everything. But still, it is not so easy to forget it, because it is necessary. It is a necessary evil, so to say. So hydrocarbons, we have got quite a large quantities available. Then gas hydrates, I will explain a little bit later on. Renewable energy is the most important one, which we have got about several terawatts. Unfortunately, these are all not being utilized. It is existing, but we are not utilized. And the minerals, of course, beach placer, it is quite large. That is monazite, ilmenite, etc. You know that in Tamil Nadu, Tuticorin, and of course Kerala, near your Koilan, your region, you have got monazite, ilmenite, and all other rare earths being mined from the sea sand. Then of course fisheries is most important one. fresh water is really unlimited. That is these are the resources. Now, sustainability is the most important one. You know that the Sustainable Goal 14 basically is decided by the UN, United Nations, and that is basically life below the water. So this SDG 14 is the most important one which we should concentrate to get resilient and sustainable development of the ocean resources. And the UN has proclaimed that 21 to 30 as the ocean decade. We will come to that a little bit later on. So we have to really conserve the ocean while utilizing it for our benefit. Now let me touch upon one by one the resources. Now the ocean renewable energy, there are various types of ocean energies. The one which is most pertinent to India is the ocean thermal energy conversion, OTEC. And of course, wave energy is not so much in this region. And offshore wind energy is quite available in large quantities. So we will go one by one. I will just touch upon all these things. You see, this is the temperature variation of the ocean from the surface to the deep sea. And this is the color-coded picture. You can see that nearer the equator, the surface temperature is high. So if we can use this temperature, surface temperature, and the deep sea cold water, let us see how we can work a method to generate power. So what you do is that this is a simple sketch. Don't worry, I am not going to talk about too much of engineering and all. I am going to talk as if like a simple science and technology student. I am going to talk only in that way. These pictures are, don't worry much about that. So what you do is that you simply take the warm seawater, you take it, and sorry. This is a device called as an evaporator. What happens is that it will have one side this warm seawater, another side there is a fluid which is normally called ammonia, and ammonia, when it passes through this, due to the temperature of the warm seawater, it boils, because ammonia boils at a very low temperature. So not very low, what I mean is room temperature. So this water from the surface is about say 24 degrees or so. It boils, and like steam coming, it will be ammonia vapor. Now you have a turbine. Turbine, you have seen hydroelectric turbines and steam turbines, etc., which produce electricity. So this is an ammonia turbine which uses the vapor ammonia and runs this, and there is a generator connected to it which generates electricity. Now once this is over, the energy from the ammonia is utilized and it comes back, and here we have got something called a condenser. It is again something similar to the evaporator, but here what you do is that on the other side you pump cold deep sea water. When cold deep sea water is pumped here, what happens? This ammonia which is in this vapor form will condense into liquid, ammonia liquid, and that is again pumped using this pump, and it continues like this, and it generates electricity. You can say that this completely is a renewable energy because there is no carbon footprint. It is zero. So this is the method of ocean thermal energy conversion, which is useful for India. And this is the way in which you can use it. You can take this warm water from the surface and deep sea cold water, and on a floating barge, it can be used to generate electricity. So such plants are worldwide available only in a few locations. It is available in an experimental way in Japan, and also in the island of Hawaii of the United States. They have got a plant which generates electricity. But in India, we have not done it, even though some attempts have been made by NIOT. Now, the other type of renewable energy, the first was established at Vizhinjam. You all are familiar at Trivandrum. This has got a caisson like this. You can see the sketch here. This is a caisson, and you see the waves are coming here, and the wave will get inside and it goes out. So when the wave gets inside, what happens is that the air above will push out, will be pushed out. And while the air is being pushed out, there is an air turbine. This is a turbine which rotates in the same direction, irrespective of the direction of the air. It rotates and there is a generator connected and electricity is generated. And the other way around, when the wave retracts, the air enters from outside into this. Again, the turbine will rotate in the same direction. This is a special type of turbine and electricity is generated. So this was set up in Vizhinjam and it was working for a quite long time. And after taking out all the data, it has been dismantled now. But the data is now used to make a smaller one. This is called a backward bent ducted buoy, a small one which floats in water and generate electricity using the same principle. So this is the way in which, one of the ways in which wave energy can be converted into electricity. But another important potential candidate for renewable energy is offshore wind in India. You see, this is a map showing the wind potential at various locations. And you can see that in Kanyakumari and Rameshwaram, and also some locations in Jakhau in Gujarat, there is a lot of potential for wind energy. And the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy is working on a scheme wherein entrepreneurs could set up offshore wind platforms in the sea and sell electricity into the mainland, and that would be a renewable energy source. So this is about energy part. Now let me talk about ocean desalination. We know the issue of water. About 19,000 desalination plants are there in various countries. You see that almost 48% of our population is facing extreme water stress, and coastal communities are going to the sea to meet their drinking water. Basically, they try to use reverse osmosis based plants, which are really not environmentally friendly. So there is a method which you can make it environmentally friendly by something called a low temperature thermal desalination. Again, it is similar to the OTEC plant. Here, instead of power, we are generating fresh water. As I explained earlier, again, here we have the warm water, the surface seawater is taken into a chamber. This chamber is called a flash chamber. What you do is that you evacuate this chamber. Evacuate means you create vacuum by taking out the air inside. You see, there is a vacuum pump. Once there is vacuum, what happens? The water will start boiling at room temperature. You know that fundamental physics. So it will boil at room temperature and steam is formed. And the steam is directed to the condenser, similar to the one which I explained in the OTEC. Here we have got the cold seawater taken from the deep sea that goes through this condenser, and the steam is condensed. That means it is cooled and you get fresh water. So this is a fresh water. It is actually DM water. DM means demineralized water. It is a purest form of water, only H2O, no other minerals, etc. So you should not drink this directly because it's not good for health, because water should always contain some minerals. So it is remineralized and used for drinking purpose. So based on this, plans have been established. This is the picture of the plant in the island of Minicoy. You are all familiar with Lakshadweep. This is the picture of the plant which was being constructed at that point in time. And these are the underwater pipes which are used to take water, etc. And this is a good success in that particular location. And NIOT has set up so many plants there. The initial one was in Kavaratti, then of course Minicoy, Agathi, and Kalpeni recently. And the other islands also, the work is going on. Unfortunately, due to this COVID situation, I think the people could not work and complete these plans. So this, unfortunately, you cannot have this in Chennai or the places where really it is water starved in the mainland, because you see, this requires water to be taken from a depth of nearly 1 kilometers, that is about 800 to 900 meters. So in this mainland, unfortunately, such depths are available only very far off from the mainland, unlike these islands. These islands, you know that they have been formed due to volcanic activities millions of years ago. And you get a large depth very close to the land. And that is why we are able to use it in these islands, but not in the mainland, unfortunately. Now, we have a combination of both OTEC as well as desalination. This is the same schematic which I showed. The same warm water comes here through the evaporator, and there is an ammonia, and this turbine generates electricity. And this water again comes to a flash chamber, which I explained, and you generate fresh water also. So this would this power that is available from this will be used to power these pumps, these 3 pumps. And you will see that this is a completely zero carbon footprint mechanism. Such a plant is under development, and we hope to have NIOT will set it up soon in the island of Kavaratti. Now, let me move on to other deep sea resources and technologies. Starting with the ocean mineral resources, you know that there are manganese nodules, cobalt crusts, gas hydrates, etc., about which I will just briefly explain. And it is at a depth of about 5,000 meters. And India has been allocated an area in the Central Indian Ocean Basin to develop the technology to mine these manganese nodules. So how is being done, we will just go through. So these are the polymetallic nodules. They contain copper, cobalt, nickel, etc. And cobalt-rich crust is something like this, where the rocks will have a coating of cobalt, which has to be scrapped. And we have got polymetallic sulfides. You know that there are underwater volcanoes like this, which really send out some plumes, and there will be some lava also. The beauty here is that the temperature, which is just inside or just when the plume comes out, will be of the order of 200 degrees, and the temperature outside will be about 4 degrees. So you see that this is a very, very unique system. And you see in this, lot of life also is there. NCPR is doing a lot of work. If you interact with the scientists there, they will be able to tell you. Perhaps this is the location where you see that life is there even without oxygen or light. So how the life came, there is something called chemosynthesis, which if you discuss with the team members there, they will be able to tell you. And that is a very, very important area of research. So here you get also sulfides, which are polymetallic sulfides, from which again you can get these minerals. Now, let me tell you, it's not so easy to take out anything from that particular depth. The pressure is quite high. It is about 600 or 550 times the pressure here. Here, the atmospheric pressure is 1 bar, but deep you have got a pressure of quite high value. Temperature is very low, and the communication, we can't use any of your Wi-Fi or any of these other communication means, because that gets attenuated in underwater. So only the acoustic communication will work. And the seawater is highly corrosive, and hydrodynamics, you know that it's continuously the waves are there, and wind and waves will really make it difficult for any system to be deployed. It is absolute darkness, more than 100 meters. There is it's pitch dark, and you should have light and camera, etc. And the understanding itself is quite limited, and hence we should have suitable technology in this region. So one of the systems which were developed is to measure the in situ soil property. That means the seabed is very, very soft. If you have to have any vehicle to go there and pick up the nodules, first of all, you should measure the properties of seabed. That means what is the bearing strength. Bearing strength means how much of load that soil can keep on that without sinking. So that is the bearing strength. Shear strength is if you have a vehicle, if it is rotating, will it really move forward or it will just slip? You would have seen vehicles getting slipped when you have rains and the road is muddy. It just rotates, but it will not move forward. So such things should not happen. So this is a unique instrument which has been developed to measure the property in situ. In situ means it is the instrument itself goes there and the measurement is taken and it is transmitted through the cables to the ship. Because if you take out this soil to the surface and then measure it, the properties will change. So we should not have such a system. So this was done and a lot of experiments were done. And this is a picture of the underwater vehicle crawler, so to say, which can move on the seabed and take out these nodules. Of course, various levels of testings and trials are going on, and IoT is doing that. Now let us move on to the another area which is called gas hydrates. It is actually methane in solid form that is available below the seabed, about 200 meters below the seabed. This is available, and you see that this contains about 1 cubic meter of gas hydrates contains about 164 cubic meters of gas, and this is the energy for future. You see the locations where they are available, and you see the quantity of methane that is available. And it is said that this, if it is tapped, it is really a boon for India and even for the world to get over the energy crisis. But there is a catch. Nature does not give anything so freely. It is not so easy to take out this manganese, these gas hydrates from the deep sea, because you know the moment it comes out, it will evaporate and it will mix with the water. And what happens is that the density reduces, it affects all the flora and fauna in that location. So it is not an easy task to take it out. Various methods are being attempted. There was some report, some publication that Japan had done it using their ship Chikyu, but later on it was said that that was not fully successful. So various trials are going on in various countries, but this is a good area where work can be done. So NIOT had developed along with a company called Williamson's Associates something called a coring system like this. This is a picture of that when it is underwater, and about 100-meter long core samples were taken, and various studies are being done, and NCPR also is part of this activity, and NGRI CSIR lab at Hyderabad also is part of these activities. Now there are various other platforms for underwater exploration, like remotely operable vehicle. You can see this, and there is a remotely operable vehicle, a smaller one, which can go for a shallower depth. And for measurement of ocean parameters, we have got Argo floats, gliders, data buoys, etc., about which some of which we will just see soon. So this ROV is normally launched from a ship, and there is something called a cage like this. It's a tether management system from which the ROV comes out, and this can go up to a depth of about 7,000 meters, after which this ROV can come out and do whatever activities required. It has got a manipulator through which it can do some activities, collect samples, etc. And AUV, autonomous underwater vehicle, is something like this, which can move on the inside the sea. It has got a propeller system. Only thing is that this is not connected to the ship. It is pre-programmed, and it has got all the transducers, sensors required, and it is the whole track is pre-programmed, and it goes and then it comes up. So, but this is limited by its battery power. Manned submersible is the newest, I won't say newest because this has been in existence internationally, world over in other countries, but in India, it is just coming up. So this is a picture of Alvin, wherein people can go up to a depth of 6,000 meters. It is untethered and it can go and view and take out samples, etc. in the deep sea. Now, this is the ROV being launched from the ship Sagar Nidhi. You can see that this is the ROV and this is the tether management system. Now, let me just say, once you are underwater, how do you understand where you are? Because as I told you, the signal which we have for GPS, you are all familiar with GPS. It's not possible underwater. Once underwater, you don't have any ways to do that. So you have only acoustic method. So you have got something called a transceiver in the ship, and through which you have got various methods. Like, for example, you put an acoustic transponder on the seabed, and you identify the position of this by moving the ship above this continuously for multiple times, and you find out the location of this with respect to the GPS, because the ship can have the GPS and it can connect with this and it can find out, okay, with respect to GPS, where this is located. Now, with this, we can use other types of mechanisms, like, for example, an ROV is going down. Where is the ROV? To know that, you can again communicate with the ship, which is at this location in touch with the GPS, and you can find out how this is being done, even when you have got other systems also, like if it comes out, how all the three can communicate and find out its location. So these are the methods which are used for underwater positioning. Now let me touch upon some of the observatories for cyclone monitoring, etc. See, on ocean monitoring is very much essential, because we know that we discussed that the energy is stored there. And the cumulative effect of this greenhouse gas is quite high, and the acidity is increasing, and integrated monitoring is required for the understanding of the monsoon, weather prediction, etc. And it is necessary to have precision oceanographic sensors which are to be connected to various platforms. So let us see how it is done here in India. There are a lot of data buoys which are there in the Bay of Bengal as well as Arabian Sea. These are the data buoys which are put by India, but there are other, these are the buoys placed by India, but there are other buoys which are placed by India, but it's as part of some joint programs like Rama moorings, etc., which is there in the equatorial region. So how these buoys work is like this. These buoys are floating, as you can see here. This is an Omni buoy. This is another buoy after deployment. This is a ship Sagar Nidhi, and these are for the tsunami buoys. I will explain a little bit later on. And you see that this is the buoy, and you have got a mooring which is really connected to the sea bottom. And there are multiple sensors here, CTD, that is current, temperature, depth, conductivity, temperature, depth sensors. Then you have got ADCP, acoustic Doppler current profiler, then various other sensors at various depths. And this measures the parameters, and through satellite, it transmits it to an IoT. You can see this is another one where it measures, which is kept in the coastal region. It will also measure the various parameters in the surface also. And this is the tsunami buoy. There is something called a bottom pressure recorder, which measures the water depth in terms of pressure. In case of an underwater seismic event, you know that the sea bottom may move down, and because of which you know that there will be a difference in water level, and there is a pressure change is measured by this, which is transmitted to the surface acoustically, and again the data comes to the NIOT and then to INCOIS. So this is the schematic of how this buoy has this weather vaning. That means that due to the weather it can move a little bit, but at the same time it will be under the cone of this BPR, this bottom pressure recorder, so that you get the data continuously. Now, many of the cyclones have been really observed by this. You can see that gel and all of these things have been measured. And quite recently, even the Yas cyclone, which came about a few weeks back, 2 weeks back, the data has been captured, and IMD, Indian Meteorological Department, has been happy to get this data, and they have been using this to predict the exact landfall point of the cyclone accurately in time and space. And if you see that the tsunami buoys, as I told you, they are in this particular locations and this location. And in case of underwater seismic event, this is how the wave travels, and these buoys will measure the the change in water level, and that data goes to NIOT and to INCOIS, and INCOIS will issue the warning as to whether there will be a tsunami or not. If at all there is a tsunami, where exactly it will come and at what time it will come. So this is the tsunami buoy which is normally used. You can see this picture shows the buoy and the bottom pressure recorder, and a little bit detailed way how it works is shown here. Now let me move on to an underwater profiling drifter, which I said. This profiling drifter is a free drifting profiling float. That means it is in like a cylinder, and what is done is there is a way in which the buoyancy of this can be changed by pumping in and out oil, and there is a bladder here at the bottom. So what happens is that this fellow will go down slowly for about 6 hours or so, and it will drift for about 9 days at this particular depth, and it does some calibration for this temperature. Then the oil is pumped from internal reservoir to inflate, and it comes up. During that time, it measures the temperature, salinity, etc. And when it comes to the surface, it transmits the data through Argo satellite. There is a team of Argo satellites, and the data is transmitted, and it will remain there about 6 to 12 hours, and it will again continue this cycle. So this is a very important system which is used for measuring the data in the ocean. And the drifter, which is again which is in this shape. You can see that a small drifter here, which just floats on the sea. It's a Lagrangian one. That means it will just float, and you can measure the temperature and the pressure and its position. Because it is on the surface, you get the GPS position. And you can see that this is the path of this one of the drifters, and the Argo float and this drifter has been indigenized, and some industries are ready to make these systems in India. And the ocean glider is, I'm sorry, there is a spelling mistake. This is a glider, it's not gilder. It is completely an imported stuff. Of course, it is indigenization of this also is under progress. What happens is that this does not have any propulsion system. It has got a mechanism to pitch. Pitch means it will just move down by changing the position of the center of gravity, and it just goes down. And when it goes to a certain depth, pre-planned depth, the pitching will change. It will pitch up, and it will be able to come up to the surface. And during all these periods, it will collect the data in a pre-programmed manner. And when it comes to the surface, it will transmit it to the satellite, and we get this data. So this is how the gliders are used, and the gliders travel very long distances. We can pre-program the glider from India to not only Sri Lanka, even Singapore or even further distances. So this is some of the results of a glider activity. Now let us talk about Arctic. NCPR researchers would be quite happy because many of them were actively participating in this program of polar ocean observations, wherein an observatory, or rather a mooring system, has been established in the Kongsvedon Fjord, and this is continuously being done every year by NIOT and NCPR, and this is the picture of the team working in that particular condition. And you can see that this is how the mooring looks like. It has got ADCP and it has got CTD sensors at various depths, etc. But it is completely underwater. It cannot be used to get data in situ, because you see that you cannot have anything on the surface in the Arctic region because of the ice formation in the during the winter. So you cannot have a sorry. You cannot have anything on the surface. So every year the team has to go there during the summer, Arctic summer, and pick it up, and the data is used for the research purpose. So NCPR and NIOT has been doing this work for quite a long time. And let me see, I mean, this data, some of the data which has been observed here, water temperature, salinity, etc. at various depths is shown here. This is only a tip of the iceberg. Lots and lots of data is there. If you approach NIOT and say NCPR, you can get lots and lots of data to do research here. And let me just move on to some coastal protection and beach nourishment. You see that the coastal region is under heavy threat. Perhaps those of you in Kerala are very familiar with what is really happening in Trivandrum, Shangumugam, and Koilon, and Calicut, and various other places. So it is not so in Kerala alone, but it is also in Karnataka, in Andhra, Orissa, Tamil Nadu, etc. So it is an important factor which is to be studied. So erosion and accretion and stable conditions have been marked in this graph, and you see that there are various places where it is accretion is more than 50%. That's a good thing. I mean, it's in Orissa. But in West Bengal and Puducherry, you see that the erosion is more than 50%. And in Kerala, 45%, and Tamil Nadu, 41%. That means you are losing land. And that is really going to be a problem. So how to stop it is, of course, let us understand the causes. Causes are natural. That is storms, tsunamis, etc., which we are all familiar. But anthropogenic activities like port development, damming of rivers, and dredging, etc., without it is, if it is done unscientifically, as in most of the cases, we get into trouble. You can see that how the waves come and hit, and how the direction of longshore drift will move the sand in this manner. So these are some of the points which are to be considered very well. And two cases, one is in Kadalur, Periyakuppam, near Mahabalipuram, and Pondicherry. This picture shows the condition of Pondicherry, this one, and Kadalur, Periyakuppam, how some of the structures have really been eaten away by the sea. And in Kadalur, Periyakuppam, you see that 1965, this was the location of the beach, and now it is somewhere here. And it is quite bad. How to stop it? So one of the methods is that to have submerged dikes like this. These dikes are put in the seabed. I will show the picture of that with certain gaps so that the boats can come inside and go out easily. And this will really prevent the waves from breaking in this region. It will start breaking here, and slowly the beach will form. This was what exactly happened. So a method of pumping the sand from the land into this type of huge tubes. You can see that these are huge tubes of 25-meter long and 15-meter circumference. These have been put in this particular location, and it was a big task. You can see 3 of them, two next to each other and one above that. And this has really helped. And you see how it is. This was the condition in before 2014. And of course, this picture is much improved now. I don't have the latest picture, but it is improved. And I think Dr. Jana is here. I mean, he and his team have done good work here. He will be able to tell. Dr. Vijaya and all of them have done this job. And it is really an improvement. Similar work they are planning to do at Shankumugam also, supported by the government of Kerala. And Puducherry has been like this in the mid-19th century, but the construction of a harbor in a not so scientific manner has really eaten away the beach. And the beach was a source of really a potential for tourism. And it became like this, and they put a lot of granite here and tried to protect the shore, and many seawalls were constructed. And the seawalls, you know that it is quite ugly and you won't have any beautiful beaches. So NIOT was approached, and a method of artificial reef and beach nourishment both was done. A structure of this particular shape was launched at this particular location, and the beach formation took place. And this has to be done on other side also, but unfortunately the other side they have not done it, so the beach formation is not complete. So the beach should have formed something like this, but it has not been formed. Only one side the beach has been formed, as you can see in this picture. You see that of course this is not a recent picture, this is before COVID, so don't think that people are like this now. So during that period the beach was formed, and it is a very good tourism potential has emerged here. Now let me just talk about some of the underwater vehicles used for coral reef investigation. An ROV for shallow depth was prepared by the NIOT team, and at the various locations in Grub Island, Jolly Boy, etc. This was utilized, and these are the pictures of the corals at the various locations. And this is really a good effort. With completely indigenous technology, we are able to see the all the underwater images. And the next one is for the human submersible, which NIOT is working hard. The team is almost midway through, and I understand that by 2022 there would be the manned submersible, which can go up to a depth of 6,000 meters. 3 people can go up to a depth of 6,000 meters, and with this vehicle you can take out samples and observe the oceans. Now fisheries, I will just touch upon. There are various cage culturing methods which have been done for fisheries, and fish aggregating device which is moored in Lakshadweep waters, wherein fishes will aggregate near here and people can catch it. And artificial reef, by putting this type of structures in the seabed in Orissa, the corals could grow in that particular location. And 9-meter cages which are moored in the coastal waters. This has been done in Andamans and Rameshwaram, as well as in Nellore. And this is a good feature wherein fishers don't have to go large distances. They can grow it in this location and collect them, catch them when they grow to a marketable size. Now I will touch upon about the UN decade, which I think now all of you are really familiar. And these are the various missions of the decade, wherein we have to generate the knowledge, and we should protect and have a healthy and resilient ocean, and a predicted ocean, and a safe ocean. and we should have a productive and sustainably harvested ocean and a transparent and accessible ocean. And these are the main points which all of us here should take up on our own. We cannot say that I am not connected with the ocean or I cannot take it up, but all of us should at least contribute to some of these, and for which, as I told you, ECOPS will be useful for us. So let us, on this World Ocean Day, let us pledge to use more of renewable energy, which will reduce the carbon footprint, and less of plastics, because you know that the plastics ultimately reach the ocean, and microplastics is really a problematic pollutant, and the fishes eat that, and when some of you eat the fish, it's carcinogenic. And use biodegradable materials in our whole life, that is important. So technologies are developed for this type of sustained utilization of blue resources. We cannot say that you have to be like in Stone Age. It's not possible. We are used to the comforts, but let us do it by protecting the coastal ecosystem. So let me thank Dr. Ravichandran, President OSI, my friend, and Professor Jayachandran for organizing this event. Let me also thank Dr. Jisha, Dr. Jena, and all others who made this possible. I'm sorry, I think I have slightly exceeded my time. If I stop here, and if there are any questions, I don't know if it is how we are going to do it. Okay, I leave it to the Dr. Jisha to take care.
Thank you so much, sir. We are so lucky to hear your words, sir. So there are some questions in the Q&A box. Shall I read it one by one?
Or I will just see it.
Okay,
Mr. Jinu has asked point on the eco-friendly technology undertaken. I could not really understand, but what I'm feeling is that all the technologies which we take up are to be eco-friendly. That is the last word. I think, I mean, from the question, what I understood, I can't explain more. Now, the next point is Jinu is again asking, explain the process of remineralization. That is a chemical process in which you have to add minerals. I mean, there is a chemical process to do that, and this is normally done in all remineralization plants. And he has again asked, what do you mean by acoustic communication? Acoustic communication, you mean that you have to send signals. There is something called acoustic transducer. And acoustic transducer will have a coil, so to say, which would really accept electrical signals, and it will vibrate the so-called, there will be the membrane. I mean, it's not a simple membrane. It would be a very specially constructed one. I am only explaining for just for the sake of making it simple, and it will vibrate. And what happens is that the vibrations are transmitted into the water, and it is transmitted over long distances. If you want to transmit long distances, you have to do it at a lower frequency. And if you want to do it at a higher data rate, so to say, you have to do it at high frequency. But if you do it at high frequency, you cannot transmit to long distances. So this is about acoustic communication. Then another one is, can you please put some points on skill development and entrepreneurship opportunities? This is a very good question. What happens, unfortunately, in Indian context is that the children, maybe the time they are born itself, their parents decide whether they should become an engineer or a doctor. They are not thinking of any other opportunities. There are so many multitudes of opportunities connected with the ocean, which nobody takes up. Let me just tell you a simple thing. One point I will tell you is with respect to the shipping industry. The shipping industry requires a lot of skilled manpower for various operations of the ship. For example, a ship which is dynamically positioned, you require a captain who is dynamic DP qualified captain. You see, the DP captains are very, very few. And because of that, to employ a DP captain, it's very, very expensive. And you see this Sagar Nidhi and Sagar Kanya requires DP captains. And this is one example. And entrepreneurship opportunities, let me tell you that unfortunately, many especially in this part of India, are quite comfortable to have a salaried job and just be happy. But of course, people in other parts of India are different. I used to tell many of even the project staff in NIOT that many technologies are developed in India, especially in the ocean sector. I will just tell the example of, let me say, this Argo float or the drifter. It is not a very high-end rocket technology or anything like that. That could be imbibed by so to say, by a person with a good intelligence who has some skill of engineering, so to say, ITI or diploma or graduate means is very good. And once you understand that, you have various methods of getting funding, like loans and soft loans, and many the government is providing. You can start developing in India, and NIOT, I'm happy, would be, I'm sure that they will be able to transfer this technology. NIOT, because it has been funded by the state, is not very much bothered to make money out of it. NIOT would like to have more entrepreneurs taking it up. So there is a cell which has been formed in NIOT to do all these things. You can contact Dr. Tata Sudhakar, who is taking care of this activity, or Dr. Ramdas, the director of NIOT. He will be able to help you out in taking up these entrepreneur opportunities. My point is, when you develop in India, don't think that you can sell only in India. You should have the market abroad. Abroad, these things are quite expensive because the production cost there is very high. So compared to that, it is very, very less here. You take it up, export, and really a lot of entrepreneurship opportunities are there. And next question from Jinu again is, what was the significance of INS Jalasha? I did not quite understand significance of INS Jalasha. That is, anyway, I will move on to the next question. Which are the current project and strategies adopted for coastal conservation? Coastal protection, it is all are environmentally friendly and sustainable methods of protection by having geotubes. These are the general points, but depending upon that particular location, it has to be studied, and then only you can identify what exactly is to be done. We cannot use the same thing everywhere. And I think Jinu is very active. He's asking, what is the chlorophyll reference in gliders? See, all these sensors are to be calibrated a priori in the laboratory, and then only it can be placed in this. So these are calibrated a priori. Then Dr. Harish Kumar, is there any direct impact by dam construction on marine ecology? And that is the first question. Definitely there is impact. See, if you touch the natural system, definitely it will affect. You cannot say that it will not affect, but you have to minimize the effect and see that the disturbance is minimum. So definitely it would be there, but you have to reduce it, because if you say that don't construct a dam, it is the other extreme. And you want electricity, you want to sit in an AC room. See, even this program now what we are conducting, you require electricity, power, all these things are required. You cannot say no. So you should have a balance between development as well as protecting the marine ecology. Today morning there was a talk by Dr. Apte in NCCR and NIOT, and he was touching upon this part. Now, what are the measures to control marine pollution by Government of India? So this particular question, I do not want to answer because I am not competent to answer, because this can lead to various other issues. So I don't want to answer this question because I am not the right person to answer this one. Next one, sir, how artificial reefs are made and how it helps in formation of beach. Artificial reef, you have to study. First of all, you have to get all the ocean data and wind data of that particular location, and you have to find out what is the best way to have the protection. Is it using a particular structure as done in Pondicherry, or using the submerged dikes? You have to, or using, you have seen that a particular structures which are dropped as in Orissa. So you have to study, and you have to identify the particular method in that particular location. And once it is done, because this is done after putting into various models, you put all the data into the models and put these structures, and the model will be able to tell how the growth of the beach will take place. So based on that, you actually implement it, and the solution, you have seen the success in both the locations. You see, I only shown 2 of them, but there are multiple numbers. Then Mr. Amal Hussain, sir, the climate change is widely affected to oceans and other water bodies. Also it affects the water animals. Doing this experiment will affect them. But which experiment, I didn't understand clearly. I feel that we have to measure the parameters, whatever it is. So I could not understand that. Next is, can you tell more about methane mining under the ocean bed? See, methane mining has not at all come to the stage where you can even use the word methane mining, because it is available there. The quantity has been assessed using BSR, that is bottom seismic reflectometry, and some core samples have been taken. So the method to take out this itself is under research. So we can't say how it can be taken, etc. Sir, then next, Sharanya Raju, sir, is there any technique developed by NIOT to collect plastic waste from the ocean? To the best of my knowledge, no. Till September last year is no. So I don't think anything new has also come within this time. Then Mr. Bhaskar, sir, is it we have manganese nodules plants in our Indian coast? No, manganese nodules are on the seabed. They are at a depth of about 6,000 meters in the central Indian Ocean basin. You have to take it out and then extract the minerals from that. So that is what is to be done. And for mineral processing, already various institutes like IMMT, Bhubaneswar, and various other institutes have developed the technology to take out minerals from these manganese nodules. Then Mr. Sita Raman, whether the cage culture technology transfer available for fisher folk? If so, which NIOT office? This is available. This is available literally free for you. In Kerala, in I think near Koilon, where is that place? I'm not able to get. We were actually working with them, but unfortunately, due to this COVID, I think they could not take it up. You can contact the director NIOT, Dr. Ramadas, or you can contact Dr. Tharani, who is taking this activity. This technology transfer is available, but 2 issues are there for feed and getting the juveniles. So that problem has to be attacked carefully. So you can contact them. There is also a good work being done at Andamans by Dr. Vineet and team. So they will also be able to help. Mr. Ravi Mahi, very good presentation. Thank you. Would like to know how much damage is generated by the recent accident in Sri Lankan water. What the damages it makes in seabed environment. See, this question, I understand that INCOIS has developed a model, and I think NCCR also has got a model based on the ocean currents and the wind, etc. Where exactly these damage will, rather the pollutants will go. Fortunately, I think till now the oil has not leaked. That's the information I get from the news. But if the oil leaks out, I think multiple tons are there. It's going to be a real catastrophe, and it will really damage the environment. No doubt about it. Already, there are reports that fishery stock is getting damaged, and it is said that a lot of I think plastic pellets are there, which will make it all the more bad. But oil means at least there are various ways and means. Normally, the Indian Coast Guard is an expert in that. They will put some booms in that particular region because the fortunate thing is that oil will be floating. So they will put some booms, and there are some chemicals. So there are various types of chemicals which are environmentally friendly, most of them, and NIOT is working in bio retardants for this. Of course, it has not come up commercially, so definitely it will damage the environment. Now, Mr. Anand is, I think there are a lot of questions. The fund provided to entrepreneur depends on their idea of plans they formulated. If the prepared plan is weak, should any aid given by government to improve it and helps to start the venue? Yes, the entrepreneur will be helped to prepare a plan. The team at NIOT would be able to support them. And even for the cage culturing, there has been a lot of support given to the fishermen folk through getting a loan from NABARD, etc. When they say that NIOT's technology is being used, NABARD will not have any doubt in giving loans. So similarly, for the other aspects also, other technologies also, it should be possible, because most of the technologies are even patented, so there is no issue. Viresh MU is asking, thank you for the answer, sir. Request the team to send the YouTube link by email. Okay, I think Sunanda will do that. And Krishna Jasar, can we reduce the impact of coral bleaching? Any plans already implemented? Could you please explain? See, this is what I said. The UN Decade of Ocean Science, we want to reduce all these effects. Coral bleaching is one among them. Why does the coral bleach? It is because the temperature is high. Why the temperature is high? Because of the global warming. Why is global warming there? Because of our use of the fuels, CH fuels on a reckless basis. So we have to reduce and go to renewable energy. So if you do go on a renewable energy basis, as India wants to do it on a large space, and you see that Norway and the UK and many of the European countries are going on a full-fledged mode to have renewable energy. If that is done, definitely, may not be immediate, but over a period of time, we can reduce the coral bleaching. Then Mr. Vadakke Bhagat Keshavadas, is there any proposal to develop shoreline monitoring system to understand the dynamic? Yes, already shoreline monitoring is done by NCCR and NIOT throughout the coast of India. Lot of work is done. You can contact Dr. Ramanamurthy, Director of NCCR, and he will be able to tell this. That should be possible. And Mr. Bhaskar, sir, how can we overcapacity of fishing vessels and measure to reduce oil spills? I did not quite understand overcapacity of, I'm sorry, and measures to reduce oil spills is we have to be responsible. The main thing is like when a fire or anything happens and things like that. No, it's because we are responsible. That's what it happens. all these issues are basically because of that. You know, the accident which happened in near Bombay High, and many people died because that particular barge was there in that particular location when already warnings were issued that the cyclone is coming, and they were supposed to go back, but they didn't go. And the funny part which I read in news is that when the people jumped with life jackets, the life jackets were not of proper quality. It absorbed water and it sank. It is very unfortunate. So I don't know how this has happened, because normally in a ship and all these things are normally approved by DG Shipping, etc. So I think this is what people have to be careful, and that is what we can say. Raja Acharya is, sir, whether ocean gliders are used for data collection during tropical cyclone. It can be done, but the problem is that ocean glider, you know that it goes along with the current and the how the glider is programmed. So if the glider is programmed to get into the vortex of the cyclone, it should be possible to do it and underwater. But the problem is if it comes to the surface due to wind and other things, it should not get damaged, because it's not a very so rugged an instrument like a data buoy. Dr. S. Deepa, is there any initiate removal plastic waste from seabed? To the best of my knowledge, no, because the seabed contains multiple thousands of tons of plastic, and I don't think it is practically possible to be done. At least not to my knowledge. If anybody else knows it, they can share it in this chat. And Mr. Jackson Peter, what about the ecological impact of mariculture in deep water? Deep water mariculture is possible in Kerala coast. I can't authentically answer this question, because as I told you in the beginning, I am not an expert in living organisms, but I can just say that in Japan, there are methods wherein they do it in deep water. They construct structures in the deep sea, and lot of fish comes there, and they use it for something like the fish aggregating device. But I am not sure whether the waters in deep waters in Kerala it is possible. So again, next question, Mr. Jinu, do human interventions are solely responsible for coastal degradation? No, that's I told you. No, there are two aspects. One is, of course, cyclone and tsunami, etc. That is not directly due to humans, but you can say that indirectly it is due to humans because of the global warming and the current weather conditions, which the number of cyclones have increased. But these are not normally considered as anthropogenic, whereas the other due to having the ports and harbors, etc., that is due to human intervention. I think this is what I think there are some other support material has been placed by somebody in the chat box also. Some of you can just see it. That is Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana. I think from Viresh has given that, who gives the support, etc. So this is I think this with this I think
questions are over.
I think there is one more question I will answer. I think with that we will end. I think it's taken a lot of time. Mr. Jackson Peter, what could be the possible solution for Chellanam coastal erosion issue? Is your organization involved in finding solution? Yes, I cannot say just like that what will be the solution, because the solution is not just like that. It just comes out like magic, and it cannot be the same solution used in the another place. See, that is what unfortunately, due to this unscientific method, that is what they do. You know that when there is a coastal erosion, there will be a huge hue and cry. The people will go on strike, dharna, and political leaders will come, and there will be a huge pressure on the PWD or the whichever department is there to somehow do something. This somehow doing something is the problem. What they do is they put lot of boulders and tetrapods and something like that, and for the moment it will be okay. But that is not a sustainable solution. It will again happen after some time. It will happen in another location. So it has to be studied systematically, and that the coast does not understand between whether it's Chellanam or I don't know the next village, or it doesn't understand. Especially in Tamil Nadu, there is a very typical case where when you go down south, Tamil Nadu is there, then Pondicherry is there. Again, you will have a strip of Tamil Nadu, then you will have Pondicherry. So what happens is that Tamil Nadu would do something for Tamil Nadu stretch, but that will affect Pondicherry. Pondicherry will not do anything. So they don't talk to each other and come to a common conclusion. So these are the issues which are faced. So it has to be studied systematically, which NIOT, NCCR and all are doing it. And finally, they come to a good solution, which I hope Chellanam also is being considered by them. So hopefully some solution will come. But only thing is, implementation is a very costly solution. So this has to be taken up by the state government. And that is the most important aspect which people have to consider. I think with this, there is some more. Which issue needs immediate attention now as the first step towards creating a cleaner ocean? According to me, stopping plastics is the most important thing. By stopping, if I say, people won't stop unless you have an alternate. You are very comfortable nowadays to go to a shop and get a plastic bag from them rather than carry a cloth bag with you, which we were doing when we were young. So biodegradable plastics should be really done. I'm happy to tell that NIOT at Andamans is doing good work using algae. They are developing some of these biodegradable plastics. With that, you should ultimately stop having plastic. So plastic is the most important point which we have to immediately address. And which issue needs immediate attention now? Okay, that's what I just explained now. I think with this, we have come to the end of the question answer. Let me thank all of you for being here. Of course, the number has reduced. It's only 125 now, but doesn't matter. At least 125 people are quite happy to be here till the end. I am very happy. So thank you very much. Once again, let me thank Dr. Ravichandran, both the Dr. Ravichandrans and Dr. Jayachandran and Dr. Jisha, Secretary of OSI, Dr. Jena, and the principal of Srinarayana College and all others who gave me an opportunity to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Shall we wind up the session, sir?
Yes, that's fine. I am done.
Dear participants, today we have jointly organized the Agora.
Just one second.
Students.
Anybody there? Any students are still there?
They are here, sir.
Any of them, they want to take a snap, you can online and take.
Atira Krishnan.
I think they are there. Okay. You can come and take a picture, and I request our others also to come. Dr. Ravi, Jana, all. I mean, you can. This photo is anyway required for documentation purpose also. No, later on for your annual report of OSI and all.
Please switch on the video.
All of you, please switch on the video. Atira, Divya, Shija, Jisha also. I think you are also to be seen, and anybody else who is there. Avanti Acharya doesn't have permission. I think very sorry about that. I think there were some issues. I think our Dr. Jisha is really active and trying to give this permission to the students.
It's motivating words, sir.
Yes, yes. I feel that all of you, if you have the email or contacts, I think you all should share with this team which has made this video. They are there, and you should start interacting. There should be a very strong ECOPS group in India I think it should be under OSI, so that it would.
I will personally, I will encourage, and we will motivate such a things. And as I mentioned, I think you can make a forum of people, and especially I am very much impressed. There are more women scientists are there, women researchers are there.
Yeah.
That is good. People will think that Antarctica and ocean women are not very favored, but I feel most of them are women. I feel very happy. I think it will be good, and you can maybe include more and more people so that you can bring a big team. It will be very, very, very nice. I think it will be. We will be model to other countries.
The video reflects it. The women.
Just to add, I have given my email ID. So if you people are interested, you can contact me. We are in the building stage of the.
Please type in the chat box.
Yes, I have already typed it.
Okay,
so,
fine.
Yeah, we'll come and gather each and everybody in this ECOP India, and we'll make it a huge group.
Good.
I think that's all. I think others are not able to come. Adira is not able to come, I think. Okay, it's fine. You can take a snap and you can.
I took some screenshots.
Okay, fine.
Smile, please.
Thank you for agreeing, Dr. Ravi and Jana and Dr. Jayachandran to show this video and all, because I just told only, I think, yesterday or so, and they really readily agreed. Thank you so much.
Yesterday night, 10 o'clock, she has contacted and we have done it.
Yes, that is good. So nice that it was done. And it came well also. I mean, that was good.
Yeah, it came well.
Yes.
You can make it a Facebook and Twitter also, social media, this group.
I think they did I think already. Twitter they did. Facebook I am not active, so I don't know. This Twitter is there. Yes.
You can arrange a presentation session also, sir, for these youngsters. We can one day arrange a session for these youngsters.
I think that will be...
Actually, OSICON is there. Maybe you all submit abstracts. So during that time, we can have a special meeting, and we can also do something special for this group during OSICON in August.
Actually, I have to make it. And almost 300 participants. And all others who have joined here, and my colleagues from OSI, everybody, good evening. With the short notice, we arranged the program, but I'm so happy that almost 300 participants joined in this program. I first of all congratulate our competitors for winning the program, because OSI is mainly designed to attract people, attract in the sense to give a guideline, what is ocean, what are the avenues, what we have to do, and all those things. I think this is one of the motto of OSI. I think through this program, we have amply conveyed the motto to others. This is one of the success of this program. And SN College must be knowing that previously, on one occasion, I have requested Dr. Baba to give a lecture, and he has readily agreed. He came up to Kollam and then gave a lecture. Like this, OSI is having almost 400 to 500 professionals in this area. Any institution in the country can make use of them, because this is one of the best opportunity. And I request every one of you join OSI also, because that is also one of the areas in which you can have good contact with these people. And I'm going to make vast narrations of what has happened. We all know that with a lot of experience, our dear Adnan sir has given an excellent lecture, which is even acceptable to the students also. On behalf of OSI and behalf of Agora and all other teams, the whole team who have conducted the program, we express our greatest gratitude to you, sir. Thank you so much. To the principal, he has so much liberal in giving platform to OSI in conducting this program. We are thankful to SN College. We are thankful to the Agora team members for giving this opportunity. As a matter of privilege and also as a matter of the time demands, I express on behalf of the Cochin chapter, also SN College, our gratitude to Dr. M. Ravichandran, the Honorable Director of NCPOR and also the President of OSI, for sparing your valuable time in this respect. And to all OSI members and also Dr. Jaina for your excellent cooperation in this regard. I especially thank to Dr. Jisha and the team for conducting this webinar in an exemplary manner, and also to all participants who have joined the program and also great interaction. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, let us wind up.
Yeah, we have given the feedback form in the chat box. Many of them have already filled. And anyone waiting for the feedback, it is in the chat box. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jana
Thank
sir,
you.
thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for giving us an opportunity.
Thank you, Sunanda.
More important is further interaction.
Sure, sir. We are there definitely. Yes.
Thank you, Jachanand sir. So, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Roxanne and everybody. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Good night, sir. Good night. Good night, sir.
Good night.